Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for the 4th of April 2023, and like always it is being recorded on the day prior on the 3rd of April. Sorry it's been a while since the last update. I've been very much overwhelmed with springtime chores, as well as working on some other stuff that you guys will see here pretty soon. So let's get right to it with the news. Starting off in the Northeast region, we'll begin with the most interesting case, and that is the chemical explosions that occurred at Norion Chemical in New York. This one is mostly interesting due to the cover-up operations that have been observed as part of this disaster. So this was originally reported on Friday. However, the details of what actually happened are very hard to find. Mainstream media is really not reporting on this very much at all. They're reporting on just the explosions that occurred and not the actual chemical spill. Gathering enough information from sources that we have access to, we can kind of cobble together a story, and it seems as if there was some kind of uncontrolled chemical reaction that took place at this plant. The uncontrolled chemical reaction took place inside canisters of peroxide, organic peroxide, which then subsequently exploded. We're tracking well over a dozen cylinders exploding due to this chemical reaction at this facility, and that's pretty much where this story ends. Local authorities have been extremely tight-lipped about the contents of the cylinders as to whether or not that chemical spilled into the nearby 18-mile creek. We're seeing local reports that suggest that this peroxide did in fact spill into the creek, and officials are not disclosing, to the public at least, how many gallons of this substance actually were spilled. On Friday, when the explosions were happening, there was a half-mile exclusion zone put around the facility, with mandatory evacuations put in place just due to the kinetic nature of these cylinders exploding. But all the while, officials have strongly urged that there is no danger to the public, there's nothing wrong whatsoever, even though they put up their own exclusion zone. So we're noticing a trend when it comes to emergency management around the country, and this incident is most certainly reflective of that trend. Moving over to Pennsylvania, there was another chemical spill in Bucks County at the Trinseo plant. This facility spilled 8,000 gallons of latex finishing solution directly into the Delaware River on the 26th of March. And it just so happened that this spill occurred directly in front of or upstream of Philadelphia's water supply. So authorities stressed that there was no danger to the drinking water whatsoever. Everything was perfectly fine. They shut the intakes in time. However, authorities also stated that it would be a good idea to only drink bottled water. So you again have conflicting testimonies. Authorities saying everything's fine, but also urging you to either evacuate or drink bottled water. This unfortunately has become a trend that we are seeing on an almost daily basis as these events unfold. Moving over to Reading, Pennsylvania, a large explosion completely destroyed the R.M. Palmer Company's chocolate factory in Reading. This was a very kinetic blast, and it killed 7 employees instantly, and a total of 10 employees were hospitalized as part of this disaster. Fortunately, 1 employee was recovered from the zone. She was located alive in the rubble about 8 hours after the blast. Officials state that the cause of the explosion is unknown. However, looking at the footage that we have of the blast and just the nature of how devastating this explosion was, it just completely leveled the building and damaged another building on the premises there. Usually we only see something that is this kinetic with a gas explosion. However, like I mentioned, we have very little details and the investigation is ongoing. Moving back to New York, we have to talk for a moment about Donald Trump's indictment. So I know that very few people want to kind of keep their head in politics these days. However, I did want to stress how important of an event this is. There probably won't be too many impacts to the average citizen, going about their daily business and things like that for the time being. We're not looking at seeing mass rioting. We're not looking at seeing really a whole lot of demonstrations regarding this. However, there are almost certainly going to be, and have already been, small, very small, limited protests at places like Mar-a-Lago and in New York. As far as the long-term impacts for this event, the strategic impacts to our nation, I guess, I think I'll keep the majority of my thoughts to myself for now on that front. However, I will say that this event clearly casts doubt over the entire 2024 election process. So I personally think that a clear pattern has emerged regarding politics and the way things are going on a political front in this nation. However, it doesn't really pay for people like me to drop that analysis just yet. It doesn't really pay to be ahead of one's time for something like that. People don't tend to like it too much. So we'll have to wait for many more things to unfold, which I think will unfold. I think we're going to see a lot more targeting of different political entities and personnel and things like that. So for now, let's just leave it at that and just say that this is, I think, an indicator of things to come. I think that this event is most certainly going to be taken advantage of by both sides, both liberals and conservatives, as a way of, I hate to say the word, distracting from other events, and as a way of garnering support. However, that is a side effect. That is the side benefit. The main benefit to something like this, and the other very long pattern of events that we have seen, is the removal of a political opponent from a position of influence. So let's just leave it at now, and we'll see how events unfold. Moving down to the Southeast region, we have a very interesting incident, which was a barge adrift situation on the Ohio River in the vicinity of Louisville. On the 28th of March, 10 barges broke free from their tow lines. I'm guessing their tow lines parted or something like that, and drifted uncontrolled down the Ohio River, where at least 3 of them became pinned in the McAlpine Dam. At least one of the barges that is still currently being recovered from the dam was carrying about 1,400 tons of methanol. So again, not exactly a great substance to have in a water supply. But recovery operations are still ongoing. Moving down to Tennessee, we of course have the event that many people have been tracking over the past few days, and that was the March 27th mass shooting at a Christian school in Nashville. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of the event itself. You guys, I'm sure, have been inundated with more details than you probably care to take in. However, I did want to mention that this is not necessarily an isolated event. I am seeing, and many of you are also seeing online, very strong rhetoric from various communities that are either directly or indirectly endorsing this kind of behavior. As we're coming up on Easter, I just wanted to make everyone aware to keep your head on a swivel because this is a very hot button issue. This is very much a situation where the federal government and federal agencies are not exactly concerned with reducing extremism from this particular community. So we have to keep in mind that further incidents may occur. So just keep that in mind as we go forward into the Easter season. Moving down to Mississippi, we of course have to mention the ongoing recovery operations that resulted from the massive weather system which devastated the town of Rolling Fork, Mississippi, as well as other towns throughout the entire state, really. This was a very kinetic storm cell, and there have been follow-on cells that have also caused damage as well, but due to the remote nature of a lot of these towns and the extremely rural nature of some of these disaster zones, the recovery operations are ongoing. Just because it gets out of the 24-hour news cycle doesn't mean that the disaster just ended. No, the town is most certainly still not there, and a lot of people are still without homes, and recovery operations are ongoing. Moving up to the East Central Midwestern region, really the only update I have is for the East Palestine hazmat crisis, which continues. A few days ago, the CDC published a report that confirmed that 7 of their investigators fell ill following their response to the initial hazmat crisis. People have been falling ill quite a lot in the area, especially locals, but the reason that I wanted to mention this is because the mainstream media is kind of warping this story a little bit. The most critical part of this report is that these investigators were not part of a cleanup crew. When it comes to hazmat and personnel who are engaging in cleanup operations, you have to assume, unfortunately, that there's going to be some kind of injury. That's the point where contamination and injuries can occur because people are in very close proximity to the spilled substance, right? They're cleaning things up. So you have to assume that there's going to be some kind of injury when it comes to cleanup operations. However, these guys were not on those teams. These investigators were part of teams that were going door to door to people's homes to interview them about any symptoms they may have or things like that. If the investigators that are going door to residential areas are falling sick, that pretty much confirms with high confidence that residential areas are contaminated, right? Reports like this really cast doubt over the story that everything's okay following this disaster, which of course, is pretty much common sense at this point. Moving over to the west central Midwestern region, we have two major incidents that have plagued this region. The first of which occurred in Minnesota at the Monticello power plant just north of Minneapolis. A couple of weeks ago, power plant officials let the public know that 400,000 gallons of radioactive tritium water has been leaking from the plant since November. You might ask, why are we just finding out about this now? And I myself am getting conflicting stories. Some reports suggest that power plant officials notified the government immediately upon detecting the leak. However, government officials are the ones who kept it quiet and concealed the fact that this leak was occurring. Other people say the power plant officials just kind of kept it to themselves and were trying to fix the issue in-house. I don't know which story is true. I don't have enough information either way. Either way, the power plant officials released this information to the public because tritium had been detected in groundwater supplies. So this tritium water has been leaking into the groundwater of the local area since November. Now, you can research the hazardous nature of tritium on your own, but also be very careful of the lies that are kind of going around regarding the nature of tritium. Officials say that it's completely harmless and that there's no problem whatsoever because tritium it's not very radioactive. Mostly it's an emitter of beta radiation, so it's not like it's plutonium or anything that is, severely Chernobyl level radioactive. However, even the quick cursory Google search will reveal that tritium is not the kind of thing you want in your drinking water. Officials are trying to say it's perfectly safe because it's safe to kind of like touch with your hands, but if you consume it internally, that's not good. And wouldn't you know it, the problems that we have with this leak is that it's in the water supply. But the story gets better and a lot more unclear. Again, a few days ago, plant officials revealed that the story is kind of wishy-washy, so let me kind of explain. One of two things occurred. Either they were trying to fix the first leak and detected a second leak, or they repaired the first leak and it began leaking again, causing a second leak. Either way, all we know is that a second leak has now occurred at the Monticello power plant. Immediately upon noticing this second leak, power plant officials initiated an emergency shutdown of the complex. This is a huge red flag. Emergency shutdowns of reactors are almost never done. Something very, very, very bad has to happen for an emergency shutdown to occur. There are many different ways of shutting down a nuclear reactor in a safe manner, and so that it doesn't end up damaging things. It's not exactly like you can flip a switch and turn it on or off. Sometimes it takes months to shut down a reactor, but that's not what we saw. We saw an emergency shutdown. That's what the power plant said, right? So I don't actually know if they scrammed the reactor, like if this was some kind of very, very serious disaster. They're not saying how or what procedures they used. My purely speculative guess is they probably shut it down as fast as they possibly could without scramming the reactor and potentially causing some kind of damage to, surrounding equipment. Details are very hard to find. You just don't get a lot of information regarding power plants other than the classic story that everything's fine, don't worry. We're emergency shutting down this reactor, but fine, like clearly things are not fine. So as the power plant stands right now, we really don't know what status the leak is under. We don't know if it's controlled or not. We don't know what's going on at all. All we know is that hundreds of thousands of gallons of tritium water have leaked from the facility over a period of many, many months, and it is actually being detected in groundwater, the exact last place you would want to find it. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on this one because, again, for some reason, mainstream media is really ignoring this one, and I don't know why. Usually any time an accident occurs at a power plant, the mainstream media is all over it. I mean, an employee gets a hangnail at a power plant and, there's a news camera there, right? So I don't know why they're not covering this one. Maybe because they believe, the official story that this is a big case of nothing, but clearly it's not a case of nothing. Clearly there is something going on here here. If you're going to emergency shut down the facility, that confirms that there's a very serious problem here. But again, we'll have to keep an eye on it. Switching gears slightly, in Minnesota, there was also another train derailment, this time in the vicinity of Raymond, Minnesota. This again was a catastrophic derailing. This is not just a simple wheel slip. 22 cars completely left the track and, devastated that portion of the track as well. And at least one of these cars was carrying pure ethanol, which of course caught fire and resulted in an evacuation order being in place for local citizens because this derailed in a sort of residential area. So we continue the almost daily trend of catastrophic train derailments. Moving down to the Southwestern region, there was one critical incident that occurred along the border. 39 illegal immigrants were killed when they set fire to a mattress inside the detention facility that they were being held. Details are kind of sketchy at this moment. However, it appears that these immigrants, who were mostly Guatemalans, discovered that they were going to be deported, so one or several of them set fire to one of the mattresses in the detention cell that they were being held in, which resulted in a massive fire breaking out and the death of 39 of them. Again, this just kind of points out to the kinetic nature of what's going on down on the border when you have such a mass casualty event occur. Wrapping things up with the Western region, we have one more derailment incident, which occurred at the Clark Fork River in the vicinity of Paradise, Montana. 25 cars derailed from the track and landed and came to rest in the Clark Fork River. Authorities initially didn't know what was on board. They didn't know what the cargo was of these boxcars. However, it turns out that it was mostly beer. So mostly consumer goods and beer. So yeah, not super great. So that's pretty much all I have for today. A lot more short and sweet than usual. I am still in the process of working on The Wire. I put that out almost daily. It's not exactly a daily product. I would like it to be, but the schedule wise, it ends up being sometimes not every single day. I really just do it when I have time for it. So if you want more timely Intel updates, please check that product out. We push it out pretty much everywhere we have access to, right? Including here on YouTube. And I'm also still working on a roll-up product that will incorporate a lot more details and a lot more stuff like that. So got a lot of projects in the works, and we're going to get on them here pretty soon. So thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.